Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear me alright. Can anyone hear me or not? Hey, we have someone watching at least. Can you hear me alright? Can you hear me okay? Hey Storks, can you hear me? I'm just trying to see if I've got my microphone on all right. Nice, okay. Just got to wait and see if a few more people join then. So, whilst we're waiting for some other people to turn up, how's everyone's days been? Hey, thanks Jay. I saw the follow earlier. Yeah, well, hopefully it should be informative if nothing else. You'll have to excuse me that this is my first stream, so I may be a bit of a noob at times. Cool. I'll just wait a few minutes to see if anyone else turns up before I start. What's the build? Well, I'll probably only get maybe 1 or 2 rows done today because it's more of sort of, I'm not attempting to build the whole thing today. So the idea is that I'm going to do sort of some of the rows today, and then next week do the columns. Then the week after go through keyboardsize.io, I think it is, to wire up the matrix and to generate the files for QMK, and then hopefully the 4th week then we'll be going over the programming in the QMK. So hopefully by then, at the end of the 4th week, the viewers should then be able to build their own kits by then, hopefully. Yeah, QMK is not too bad once you get the files from the keyboardsize.io, because although it's not the most up-to-date QMK, it's still got the basic files that you will need. So it won't get you the advanced stuff, but it'll get you your basic key matrix working, so then from then on you can go forwards and hopefully still need to update the labels. Thank you, Tidal. Yep, I've got it all recording, so I'll be able to cringe while I listen to myself. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I shall be recording, so hopefully I shall, and I do have YouTube, so yeah. Yeah, I know. The only reason how you learn from your mistakes is to see them in person and then hopefully not make them listen next time. Okay, I think everyone's here that is going to be here. So I'll start off by going through some of the basic tools and other components that you're going to be needing. So I will assume that you all know how to use a soldering iron and you've got solder, so I'll get those out of the way. So the next most important part is obviously going to be the wire. No, I haven't posted it there. I'm not involved in any of those communities. So, and I didn't want to have my first stream with lots of people. So anyway, the first thing I was going to talk about is the wire. So the wire that I have, which as you can hopefully see down here, so this is 18 gauge and it's known as magnet wire, or I think enameled wire or magnet wire. So what this is basically is it's solid core and it has on the side, on the outside of it, a coating, which in this case, this one is you can get either a soldered version or a non-soldered version. This one that I'm using currently is soldered, but as we'll be scraping off the outside of the cable anyway, then I don't think it really matters too much. The reason why it's 18 gauge is obviously it means that you can bend it and it will hold its shape. Whereas if you were using multi-cord, multi-stranded cable, then obviously you won't be able to bend it, it won't hold its shape, and you end up with a build that's just looking like a hamster's nest. So that's the wire out the way. If anyone has any questions, by the way, put them in chat and I'll try and answer. So you'll obviously need a controller. So this is a postage board. So as you can see, there's the pin layout that you're going to use for your controller. Now, one thing that is important is to draw yourself a layout of the controller. What this means is that when you're planning your rows and columns, it'll be a lot easier when you come to create the matrix. So this is basically the rows and columns of the postage board. So the idea is that when you're going to be building your matrix, you can then label these rows and columns with the pins, so that when you're going and building the matrix, you can easily select the correct pin layouts for what you need. So another tool that I'll be using is this. It's called a component bender, and I'll be using it for bending my diodes and also for holding the wire in whilst I'll be scoring through to getting the outer sheath off the wire to expose the copper inside. So this I got off eBay, I think from Germany. It's not very expensive, but if you need to bend diodes for either a hand-wired build or a through-hole build, then this will make great use of getting them all equal size so they'll fit easily into the PCB. You could of course bend them using pliers, but this way you're going to get them neat and spot on. So I'd recommend one of these for anyone who's going to be building lots of boards that would need through-hole components. Okay, so you also need usual pair of wire cutters or snips and a pair of pliers, just for when you're bending and then finishing off your builds. So it allows you to obviously bend your wire accurately, and so you can make a tidy job. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, I'm going to bring in the board that I'm going to use. So as you can see, I've already soldered on the postage board controller. You'll notice that the three switches below it had to be rotated round in order to fit the controller on. Obviously, if you're going to be using a Teensy or other controller, then you won't have to do this with the switches, but you would probably have to find some other way of securing the Teensy on your case when you're finished. So I shall just get my soldering iron on and ready. So whilst that's doing, I'm going to first do the diode. So I'm going to do the first row across the top here. So I'm going to be using my bending tool. So I'll put the diode in to where I want it to go. Then I'm going to bend it right hand, because this will be going around the pin and the switch. And then the other side is going to be bent up to go around the row. So your diode should look like this. So you see that's going to go around the pin like that. So I'm just going to make enough to go along the row. Apologies for not doing that diode on shot. I did not. It's hard to see where the camera is when there is quite a delay. So I shall try and do this on shot. So down, flip that round, then bend upwards. So I'm just going to bend the rest of these off camera, but hopefully you can see how it's done. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, doing the last two diodes now. I've got to redo these because I wasn't checking the polarity beforehand, which is something I should have done, because as you know, diodes can only go one way. That's fine, I can just rebend them. Or actually I can just rotate them because they're the same. Either way up. Okay, so that's all the diodes done. So now we can just bend the wire so that it holds the diode in place on the leg. Now that we've already formed half the bend, we can now close it off. Doesn't help when your tools are magnetic. Yep, this is going to have to be done one at a time. That's the first one done. I do apologise. This is probably not looking too good from the video standpoint. I'll go and solder these as I go, otherwise I'll just keep knocking them out. Okay, that's the first two done. I do apologise if I have gone out of shot. Probably several times. Oh, I've done that on the wrong way around. I do apologise if some of this is being blocked by my hands and the camera, but it's quite fiddly to get this on, and I wanted to have a close-up shot so that the process could be seen properly. No, that's the wrong way. Just a couple more to go now, and then that'll be the first row of diodes done. Chat's been quiet, so I don't know if it's stopped or if my hand wiring is that mesmerising that you don't want to say anything. last diode. So now we'll take our snips and snip off all of the excess on the side of the switch. So there you'll see that now that we have the legs of the other side of the diode still upright, I'll just straighten out this one. But you can see now that we have a nice straight line with which we know exactly where to mark the wire so that when it comes to filing away the coating, we know exactly where we need to file to. So next we get our wire. We're going to this row 1 up here by my thumb. So you want to measure about a centimetre at either end, more than where you're wanting it to go, and then cut. So now you want to straighten out your wire, because it will naturally want to bend as it is being on a coil. don't have to be too straight, because when we solder it to the legs, that should then hold it in place. So you'll finish up with something like that. So now the first thing we want to do is we want to anchor this end. We're not going to solder it in yet, because we still need to obviously measure out places along where the diodes are to then scrape away the outer layer. So what we do, if we put a 90-degree bend on the end of the wire. Now this is going to go, like I said, right through where it says the row 0. So you want that. Now to rub off the outside coating, I'm going to take the pliers and put your part that you've just bent into the pliers. You don't want to grip it too forcefully, because we're not trying to bend it. All you're doing is just rubbing off side to side, rubbing off that outer sheath around the edge of the copper wire. So you can see how it's coming away. Then you want to keep going until as much of that outer coating is rubbed off, exposing the pure copper inside. So what you want to end up with is like this. Hopefully you can see it on camera, the way that the bottom 2 or 3 millimeters has had the sheath rubbed off and has exposed the inner copper wire. So then you put your wire into the connection onto the MCU, in which case this is obviously the postage board. So that goes into the row 1. Like so. Then we can solder on our row 1. And that has now fixed our cable, our wire, at row 1. I'll just get my solder out of the way. So now what we need to do is we need to secure the other end of the wire. So we'll just bend the wire around so it rests approximately at the bend in the diode. Or we can heat the solder joint and just lightly direct the wire from that solder joint down towards the first diode. So we don't need to put a direct join so close to where the solder is, because that can put stress on that joint. Then just using the pliers, bend the wire at that first diode to leave it mostly straight across the rest of the diodes. Now we need to secure this end, because otherwise if we don't get that right, then it's going to look bad when you file away the edge of the mask. So for that, just use a piece of blue tack. On second thoughts, I should have blue tacked the row 0, because I'm going to need to desolder that off once I have made the marks on the wire anyway. So now to file off the outer core where it joins the diodes, you're going to need to use a small jeweler's file similar to this. You can get them obviously in the straight files or the rounded ones, so I'm going to use a rounded one. So I'm just going to mark on the wire where the diodes are. So that you know where to rub off the sheath in order to expose the copper, because obviously with magnet wire the sheath would prevent electrical connection, so we need to rub off that outer core to expose the copper inside, which will obviously use to wire our matrix. I did intend to build this whole top row beforehand, so I would have one ready to show an example and I won't make so many mistakes on camera. but unfortunately I have been extremely busy at the local community centre because we're having a 3-day exhibition over the weekend detailing the stories of the soldiers who are on the war memorial, given that it's obviously a centenary of the First World War Armistice Day this weekend. So now I've marked all of those. As I said before, I've got to desolder this because I forgot that we need to take off the wire in order to fully get rid of the sheath. That has come away. You can see quite clearly at the bottom where solder has flowed on it, so that is why we needed to get rid of the sheath. So I'm going to remove this for the moment while I show you using the bending tool how I'm going to just scrape off the outer sheath. So now you can see quite clearly where I have marked down here. So going to now using this as a guide to help ensure that it stays in the correct position. And I'm going to file away. Which should then expose more of the copper underneath. You obviously don't want to file away too much, otherwise you will go straight through the wire, but you can see that I have now exposed the copper underneath, which is then going to make contact with the solder and ensure that you're going to get a good solid joint. So that is what you're looking for. So that is going to now accept the solder. So just go along and find out all of those points that you've marked. and just make sure that all of the outside sheath is rubbed off, so you're going to get a nice solid connection. Sorry if this is really boring. I do realise that doing a hand-wired build is not as easy as just soldering in switches, so now you see there I went too far over, so I'm going to have to redo that one again. That's why it does help having this the component folder just to act as a guide. Sounds like this. You need about 6 hands. I think that's in the right place. I might have to redo that one. Okay. Just had to check there because I thought I might have missed one, but no, this is the last one. Sorry about that, that was my tyres falling on the floor. Okay. Should now end up with something like this, where as you can see all of the spots that we've filed away. I've exposed the clear copper underneath. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to again using the bending tool as a template, we're going to lightly tin where we've rubbed off the solder, so that this will basically make an easier connection than with the diode. You can see it's a bit fiddly, but if we use the channels then it's a lot easier. So that is what we want. As you can see, the solder has stuck to the copper. This will make it easier when we finally do put the row together. So you see, because I'm going directly onto the copper, I don't need to have flux on the end. So therefore I can just put the solder onto my iron and then touch the copper. Held that too close to the end, but not to worry. So as you can see, we've got solder points on everywhere we're going to need to join onto a diode. So back again. I'll just reheat the solder pad, put the row 1 back in, make sure it's bending around. And now you will see that the solder pad that we've just done is near to where the bend is in the diode. So we'll bend the diode over to ensure that it locks onto where that solder pad is. And then when we solder, you'll see that forms a nice bridge between the diode and the wire. Then it's just a case of going around down the whole row, folding the diode back over the solder point, and just tacking that diode onto the previous solder that was there. Just going to need a piece of blue tack just to hold this very end. And there we have it. So that is your first row all soldered. Then we can just nip off these legs. And there you have it. So that is your completed row. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I do have my other boards behind me if you wanted to ask any questions about those or to see them or anything like that. So I shall wait a few minutes for a reply, and if not, then I shall be ending the stream. Thank you, Stocks. It's not hard, really. Like I said, it is longer, obviously, than just soldering in a row of switches. But at the same time, I think that it gives you more freedom because you can have your own layout, like I did with my UK78. So instead of having to have a PCB, then you don't need one. Obviously, you'll go and solder on the other columns in the same, other rows in the same way. Obviously, writing on your sheet exactly where you put each row, because this is going to be what you're going to be referring to when you come to doing your matrix in a couple of weeks' time. So be sure to keep this handy with the rows and columns on your for your matrix. So if no one's got any more questions, then I shall be closing the stream. Thank you for those that did watch, and hopefully when you look at next time I'll have all of the rows done and we can work on the columns. Thank you, Storks. I'm glad to see that I've helped you. So if no one's got anything else, then I'll be ending the stream in a couple of minutes. Okay, I don't think there's going to be anything else, so I shall see you guys next week when I'll have all of the rows done, and then we can start work on the columns, which is similar to the rows, but obviously you need to plan where your columns are. So I shall see you next Wednesday at the same time, and I shall put this video up so that others can watch at a later date. So I shall see you next week. Yeah.